Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Aware Project Psychedelic Awareness Salon. I'm Ash. I'm really excited that you're all here tonight. And this is a particularly special night because this is our first birthday. So I'm really excited about that. The other thing that I want to announce is we're going to be launching an integration support program in the next couple of months. So for those of you, maybe if you've had a really big awakening experience and you need help processing what you've experienced, we are going to have trained professional therapists and life coaches that have experience working with entheogens. And so we're going to have this as a program to serve the community. We also have, it will also, if you're planning to have a big experience, we can help prep you for what that might be and how to kind of mentally prepare yourself no matter what that is. So I'm really excited about this program. We're going to be launching it in the next couple months. If you are interested in either participating in it or in maybe being a therapist that would help us as part of the program, or if you want to be a volunteer, if you go to awareproject.org, at the top it'll say integration, and we have a form there you can fill out just so that you can stay up to date with the information about the integration program. So keep an eye out for that. So without further ado, I'm going to invite up Sita. I'm so excited to have her here at the salon. She produced the Visionary Convergence conference that happened back in September, which was a very large plant medicine, entheogenic focused conference here in Los Angeles, which, as far as I know, there hasn't been one like that here. So, you know, for some reason, Los Angeles has been a little bit behind in our organization around this topic. So it's great that we're building a community down here. We're educating ourselves, and I'm just so excited to have you. So with that, please come on up. Thanks, Beth.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me back there? Yeah? Okay. So I'd like to first thank Ashley Booth for starting the Aware Project. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Alicia Danforth for her support and organizational energy here in Los Angeles, supporting women and supporting our projects and our vision, which included the vision of the Aware Project and of Visionary Convergence, which was produced not just by me alone, but PlantTeachers and all the people that helped that along. So thank you, Ash, and thank you, Alicia. So you're doing the thing. So, okay, why don't you go to the next slide here. So before I address what's up on the screen, I'm just going to spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about who I am and what I'm up to with respect to PlantTeachers, Master Plants, and Dietas. So I came to work with plant medicine and specifically ayahuasca in Peru, well actually starting in Brazil many years ago, and started a formal apprenticeship in the Shipibo shamanic tradition in 2002. And the cornerstone of Shipibo Ayahuasca Shamanism is this practice and concept called dieta. And what we mean by dieta is not just food restrictions, but lifestyle restrictions and a connection with teacher plants. How many people here are familiar with ayahuasca? How many people here have drank ayahuasca? How many people here have done a dieta with a master plant? Okay, great. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, but I'm going to give a little bit of a primer on ayahuasca and what it is, even though It's quite popular now as a plant medicine, as an entheogen, as a gateway to a shift in perception. Ayahuasca has been used for a number of generations. We don't know how many. Many people estimate it as thousands of years, although there's no record to support that, primarily because the archaeological record in the jungle composts very quickly. So ayahuasca is a combination primarily of two plants, Ayahuasca Vine, the Ayahuasca Vine, the vine is called ayahuasca, and a leafy plant, usually chacruna, sometimes chalipunga. For purposes of this talk and explanation, I'm going to stick to chacruna or chacaruna, as the Shipibo say, because that is the plant the Shipibo use. The Shipibo are an indigenous group from the Peruvian Upper Amazon in the Ucayali region, and the ayahuasca vine is Banisteriopsis caffi, and the vine itself contains harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine, which are beta-carboline alkaloids, and they act as a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And the reason why that's important is because the chacruna, the Psychotria viridis, contains N,N-dimethyltryptamine, which is not orally active. If we were to prepare a tea with the chacruna and then drink it, we would not experience any perceptible effect because it would be neutralized primarily by the monoamine oxidase in our gut. But lo and behold, the vine temporarily inhibits the production of monoamine oxidase, and as a result, the active alkaloids in the leaf, the DMT, as it's referred to here in the north, crosses the blood-brain barrier and produces what in allopathic medicine or in the north people would call a psychoactive effect. In Shipibo Ayahuasca Shamanism, while that's true, there are multiple storylines, including the shift in perception and the shift in perspective, and the opening of our gates of perception into shamanic realms, into a greater sense of self-awareness, and a variety of other experiences. So, many generations ago, well, not even that many generations ago, maybe as recently as 1 or 2 generations ago, primarily the shaman, the ayahuasca shaman, the curandero, the doctor, was the one who drank the ayahuasca in order to receive a vision on how to help the patient. And so the patient didn't necessarily drink ayahuasca. The patient actually dieted with a plant for their healing. So the shaman drank the ayahuasca to have a vision, to have insight, to see what was needed for this patient and their condition, with the premise being that there's a spiritual basis for all of the the ills and the discomfort and the dis-ease or misalignment. And so through having this vision, they would say, oh, okay, so now I see what the problem is, and here is the plant you are to diet. And so in terms of this concept of dieting, that was one element of the dieta. The other element of the diets with the plants were for purposes of learning. So engaging in periods of dieta with the plants, extended periods of time with certain restrictions, so that we could connect with the spirits of the plant and learn and apprentice on the path of Shipibo Ayahuasca Shamanism. So I offer that as background because most of us think about ayahuasca as a standalone, and certainly many people diet ayahuasca, whether it's the vine or the vine and the leaf combined. But in the Shipibo tradition, it is dieting many different master plants or teacher plants, for which the, Amazon is notorious. It's very rich pharmacopoeia of many different plants and many different medicines that have actually given rise to many of our Western pharmaceuticals. So with respect to the plants themselves, I was thinking today that how much I love this book. So it's a plug for Stephen Buhner's work, Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm. It's really it's quite an undertaking. It's 525 pages. It's absolutely amazing when it comes to talking about plants. And he reminds us, about these insights of Darwin that, he suggests are paradigm altering, and I agree that the root of the plant is in fact its brain, and that the plant is using sensitive and intelligent analysis of its surroundings to navigate through the soil. And so I'm just going to leave you with that quote and think about that as we're talking about the process of dieting with these plants and the relationship that we're actually dieting with, the relationship of the plant to the soil to this particular planet that we're living on at this time.
Sita.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's, and just to say that I am talking about, the Shipibo lineage, no other lineage. There are many different lineages. There is mestizo, shamanism, and dieting. I'm talking about the lineage that I'm familiar with, and I'm talking about the lineage where we're actually dieting here in North America, which doesn't require ayahuasca. So there are 3 categories of plants. There's the master or teacher plants, medicinal, and ornamental. So the master or teacher plants are those plants that have profound intelligence and information to share with us that transcends the bounds of their own definition. And by that I mean, if we're talking about a plant like Ayahuasca, that plant will offer information not just about what Ayahuasca is, but about the nature of the universe and the nature of ourselves. And we know that something is a master plant or a teacher plant because of its qualities. And in this particular lineage, how the indigenous people came to know whether something was a master plant or a teacher plant is by dieting it. And then you have this experience, and you're testing like the ecological validity of that experience by conferring with others in the communities about the visions that are being delivered by these plants, the universes that are being entered into by dieting with these plants. The master and teacher plants are also medicinal plants, so that they heal, and they can heal on the physical level, the psychological level, the spiritual level, in addition to being teachers. And in the Shipibo tradition, each plant, whether it's a master plant or not, is thought to have a spirit. So when we're dieting, we're engaging with the spirit of that plant. The next category of plants are medicinal plants. So those plants may not be teacher plants, but they are medicinal in that they can cure specific ailments, whether it be, a cold or asthma or parasites or some other ailment. And so when I talked about the shaman drinking ayahuasca and having a vision and coming to understand what plant does this person need, they may have this vision of the person they're working with and they're like, oh, okay, they need to diet Ohe because they need to clean out their system. And, in modern application, Ohe is used oftentimes for cleaning out residual effects of pharmaceuticals or heavy metals or excessive addictive drug use. So a medicinal plant is one that is being prescribed or taken or used primarily for its medicinal properties. And then there are the ornamentals. And the ornamentals are those plants that interact with the other plants and are part of the ecosystem of our universe, and primarily for humans are ornamental in that they may produce flowers or scents. Now, I personally, in my experience, after my years of working with these plants, believe that the ornamentals are also medicinal. So if we're talking to the Shipibo, they may not think so, but in my experience, there is great value in the artistry and the fragrance and the beauty in the healing process with the ornamental plants as well. So as mentioned, the Dietas is the cornerstone of Shipibo healing modality and ayahuasca practice. So we could talk about a practice, or we could actually interchange the word practice for dieta. So in the Shipibo tradition, over a period of time, the shaman's diet with various plants for extended periods of time, and that becomes their practice. So that the diet itself and what was learned and the connections with those plants are in fact the shaman's practice. So when they're working with a patient, or if we're at a modern ayahuasca center with a pasajero, as we're referred to, what comes through is their diets, the connections with these plants, the healing energies of these plants, the sensibilities of these plants, and they're coming through the shaman and being shared or prayed for or brought forth to help the person who's sitting in front of them receiving the chant or the ikaro. And the spirits and the elements of these plants and the diets come forth in the ikaros, which are the sacred songs or the chants that are sung in the ceremony with ayahuasca. And as many of you know, currently, and probably starting in the late 1970s, which isn't that long ago, tradition is ever emerging, culture morphing and changing. It shifted in, some of the communities. If you go up the Ucayali and the Pisgay rivers, in those situations, the shamans are drinking ayahuasca and they're diagnosing and, bringing healing and information to their communities. But now, people from the north, people from, Europe and Asia and all over the world are coming to Peru and other places. We are a global ayahuasca drinking culture now, and drinking ayahuasca. It's not just the shaman. And in this, there is this opportunity to connect each of us with the plants ourselves directly. Okay, so Amazon, rich, diverse pharmacopoeia of these plants. And so with respect to the nuts and bolts of the dieta carries with it restrictions of food, activity, and mindset. So there's no salt, no sugar, no spices, particularly garlic and onion, no alcohol, no sex, including masturbation. And in my first diet, my teacher told me, and no sex in your dreams. I'm like, really? How's that supposed to work? Dairy, red meat, and then there are other restrictions depending on the curandera or curandero and the specific diet and the plant being dieted. So these restrictions are held so that our primary relationship during that time, much like we would be in a primary relationship with another human being, is with the plant. So we are cultivating a relationship with that plant spirit and coming to know that plant spirit. And, in many ways, many people believe becoming more plant-like, because we are also not bringing in other strong forces and energies to interfere with our capacity to relate to the plant that we're dieting with. And so there's the food, as mentioned, there's the sex, there's alcohol, recreational substances, marijuana, and I'm offering no commentary whatsoever on, or judgment, I should say, whatsoever on these substances or these activities. It's just that when we're in dieta, we really want to make the plant our primary relationship. And then there is a matter of degree. So if we're in a really strict dieta, in a quote-unquote traditional setting, we'll be in the jungle, in a tambo, in isolation, and we're not seeing anybody. But now, here in North America, which is what I'm talking about here tonight, we have the capacity and the opportunity, because many people have been to Peru and spent years dieting and are now able to bring and share this technology here in North America. So perhaps we're not in isolation because we're going to work every day. But we are restricting our activity. Maybe, we're not so much on the internet except as required, or maybe we go to work and we come home, and when we come home, we don't really talk to anybody. And when we're out in the world, we don't touch anybody. So this is all a function of cultivating the connection with the plant. When we're dieting, we're also taking this plant in on a regular basis, In most cases, that's on a daily basis, and then having a period of time where we connect with that plant, and we go into a period of repose, and we connect with the plant in the dream time. We assess how are we feeling physically, how are we doing in terms of keeping that connection open. So we talk about opening the diet with a plant. So that's typically done with a practitioner who opens that connection, and then during the time that you're dieting, that connection with that plant is being stewarded by the practitioner, and then it's closed and sealed. And what we say in this work is that when the diet closes, it opens. So in a way, you're in repose from your life, you're learning and connecting with this plant, and then when the diet closes, it opens into your life, so all of the lessons and teachings and the guidance of that plant can come forth in the day-to-day life and in activities that we may have restricted ourselves from during the period of the dieta. So the dieta is a practice of intention and belief. And what I mean by that is what will dictate what plant we diet, and the approach that we take in dieting that plant is dependent on our intention. And there are different plants that are good for different intentions and different ailments. And the component of belief is probably applicable not just to dieting, but to many things. The extent to which we bring our belief to the process also influences the outcome. And it can be a big hump to get over for us in the North, who maybe are thinking, okay, this plant's going to teach me something. How is that going to happen? But, if we can take that leap of faith and get into the belief zone of the plants and the capacity of the plants to communicate with us, that also will influence and amplify what we're able to receive through the process of the dieta and in the relationship with the plants. And it really is a practice of cultivating a spiritual relationship with the plants. And so I mentioned that I believe that these plants have spirits. So it's really allowing ourselves to have a spiritual cross-species communication and interplay and interface. When we enter into the spiritual dimension of the plant, it also manifests in the intellectual, psychological, physical, and material realms. So the foundation is we're going to start in the spiritual dimension in the realm of the spiritual fabric. And so what we heal there and what we're able to connect with there then manifests in the other realms as well. I mean, we are all connected. We're holistic beings, whether we feel that way or not. So when we bring our awareness to this idea, and maybe we can't approach it from every angle, but we pick one, and that happens to be the spiritual dimension, and we say, okay, I'm gonna see what this is all about. What are these plant spirits, and do they really have something to teach me, and what is it that they have to teach me? And I'm going to be open to the manifesting. I believe they do, and evidence shows that they do. And part of the way we facilitate that is by eliminating the distractions. The red meat, the cannabis, dairy, the things that can clog our system, too much internet, too much touching other people, and we're really like, okay, I'm really going to pull back, I'm going to clean and clear and open the pathway. And then what generally happens for most people when they come to this with a little bit of faith and a little bit of discipline, the rewards are great, and it creates a feedback loop. So we start to experience the rewards in other dimensions, and that's, I know for me, what keeps me going when I'm dieting. So dieting in North America. So here we are, we're in Los Angeles, and we're not in the jungle. Maybe we're not drinking ayahuasca, but we want to heal something. So there are many really wonderful modalities for healing, and this is just one of them. And so what we've learned and what I've learned in my practice is that we can utilize these technologies from the Amazon and apply them here in North America, and that they work. So one of the ways that we found that they work is by dieting other plants here in North America and realizing, well, wait a minute, not only can we bring these plants from South America to North America and diet with them successfully and see results, but we can also bring this technology to the plants that are here in our own backyard and see results, because now we're discovering what are the master plants here. So that's one thing that we've learned. And this is not a reductionist view. This is not like, okay, now we're going to send it to the lab and we're going to, analyze what alkaloids are in this plant and that plant, and we know that that will produce a result. It really is driven by what I believe is ecological validity. And by that, I mean the ecology in which we are living, operating, working, and dieting is providing a bit of a feedback loop. Okay, so we're dieting, and instead of being in isolation, we're actually here in the real world. And what are we learning in the process of dieting that's being applied immediately in the real world? And is it working? Are we seeing results? I have been stewarding diets longer than I've been actually tracking the diets themselves. And the results run the gamut, in terms of what we've seen. There have been results in the physical dimension, results in the spiritual dimension, results in the emotional dimension, and even in the intellectual and artistic dimensions, like these openings. And so when I say it's not reductionist, we can't reduce it down to a laboratory process, because so much is dependent on the relationship of the person who's dieting, not just with the plant, but the person that they're dieting with, the person who's guiding them, and the setting, their emotional set point, and the setting in which they're dieting. So it's not a hard and fast rule. So what's happening here is we're developing a body of folk knowledge. And what I mean by that, it's a body of knowledge that's coming from experience, okay? And it's a body of knowledge that's coming from us actually doing it, rather than, being told about it because somebody tested it in the lab with, 27 subjects, male, ages 18 to 27, blah, 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 right? It's, and it's those of us who have dieted, both here and in South America, talking to each other and saying, wow, I had that same experience, plus I had this experience. And what we're finding, and what I have found to be true here in North America as it is in South America, if I diet a plant, and I'll just use one for example. There's a plant called Inca Marosa, and it is a plant that is heavily dieted in the Shipibo tradition. There's lots of plants that are dieted in different traditions. This happens to be one that is primarily used in the Shipibo tradition. So for me, I dieted this plant for 1 year continuously. So I kept all of the restrictions for 1 year, and I took this plant almost every day for a year. And during that time, I spent about a third of the time that I was dieting in Peru. So that plant for me, it's a plant of the water realms, because each of the plant has its realms, and there's a body of folk knowledge that comes with it from the Amazon to begin with. So it's a plant of the water realms, and it is a heart-opening plant. So for me, I experienced a profound heart opening, and I experienced a profound flow, that allowed things that I needed to be carried away, and also the flow of the water that carried the force of the water, really understanding the force of the water. And there were certain imagery and visions that I had during the course of this diet. I'm not going to go into all of them here. Then, when somebody diets this plant with me, I'm opening my connection to this plant for them. So I'm sharing that connection with them. So they may have similar visions or a similar sense, but then they have their own on top of it. And if that person happens to be an apprentice, let's say, and then they go on, to diet a number of different plants, then they then will share that connection to the person who diets Merosa with them. But all of this activity and this energy around dieting this plant is folded into the collective diet of everybody who has ever dieted Merosa. And I believe feeds the power of this plant and its capacity to share its information, its intelligence, and its healing properties with everybody who diets it. So the plant is becoming more familiar with us, saying, look, this is what's coming forth. So the plant is also learning, right? So we're learning from the plant, but the plant is learning from us and cultivating this relationship, and then carries that capacity energetically to the next person who may be calling that forth from their diet with it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, great, thanks.
I have a question. When you say you're dieting a plant, let me understand that. Is that all you're eating for a year?
No. So it depends. So in terms of your food diet, you're not, you're limiting salt, sugar.
That plant is part of your diet, but what percentage of it?
Okay. So essentially, it depends. And since we're talking about dieting in North America, typically these are made into teas or decoctions, and so you're taking a little bit of it, right? If the plant is available fresh, then you may be pulverizing it, adding a little bit of water, and drinking it. And it depends on which plant it is, how much you take, right? So like there's a plant called Pinyon Blanco, amazing, beautiful plant. It also can be really toxic in large amounts, so you wouldn't want to take too much of it. So you're eating a regular diet, but for example, like I dieted a plant, Ayahuasca cosmica, and it's a plant that doesn't really like wet things. So funny that it sounds funny, but like pretty much like if I wanted to have a good strong diet, I eliminated as much wet food as possible for considerable periods of time.
Most food is wet, everything.
Right, exactly. There's a hard diet. So, and the other thing that's really interesting is this notion of eliminating protein and eliminating iron, because really the idea is you want to leave your body and get into the mystical, non-physical realm. So the more that you're willing to let go of that physical attachment, the more you're able to get into the spiritual dimension and the dimension of the plants.
How much were you taking on a daily basis of mind-altering plants?
But they're not all mind-altering. That's the thing. Like they don't all have psychoactive substances. Some of them do. Some of them do, but to a slight degree. Most of these are not mind-altering in that like ayahuasca contains N-endomethyltryptamine, right? So chances are someone's going to have a mind-altering experience. The experience is mind-altering, but the plant isn't mind-altering. The altering of perception is because of the relationship with the plant and the diet, not because the plant has a certain alkaloid. Trixanango, yes. Toei, yes. Some plants actually do have psychoactive alkaloids, but the majority do not.
So if you were to do a 3-week ayahuasca dieta, you would not necessarily.
Well, if you were dieting, okay, so here's the thing. You can diet Ayahuasca, the vine, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So I'm going to answer that when I get to that point. But you can also diet with ayahuasca. Like if you go to Peru and you're drinking ayahuasca and maybe you're not going to be there very long, you're not going to do another master plant, you can diet with ayahuasca. And certainly, there's a high likelihood that you're going to have what we call a psychoactive experience because you're drinking ayahuasca, which contains the ayahuasca vine, the Banisteriopsis capi, that is inhibiting the monoamine oxidase, which is potentiating the DMT in the chacruna, in the psychotria. Does it make sense? So you're in an ayahuasca ceremony, there's a high likelihood that you will have an experience that you would describe as psychoactive.
When you say dieting, I'm dieting with a plant. That means You're doing it daily. And
You're cultivating a relationship with the plant.
So it's a part of your daily diet.
Uh-huh.
And you may have restricted some other things. So you could diet with almost any plant. You could diet.
Well, exactly. That's exactly the point when we're talking about North America, right?
Yeah,
So in our practice, we've dieted with jasmine, we've dieted with sequoia, we've dieted with oak, with western redbud, and all of these plants here in the north to determine with green tea. Green tea has this amazingly long history of relationships, of a relationship, with human beings. So, we've dieted. Is this a master plant? So yes, exactly.
If I drink coffee every day, I'm dieting with coffee?
No. Good try, though. No, but you could. And in fact, the original use of coffee was, in fact, for spiritual purposes. Another story. But you could say, okay, I really want to find out what coffee is about. And maybe you decide to cultivate a coffee plant, and then you pick the berries, and you roast, and you prepare some coffee, because there are other dimensions, too, in terms of, other ways to have these connections, which include cultivating and caring for the plants that we're ingesting. So you say, okay, I'm going to utilize the Shipibo technology of dieting and diet coffee, and let me see what I learn from it. Absolutely, do it. Let me know how it goes. Yeah. So these are the plants that have been dieted, that I've stewarded diets for, and a few of the results. And the results are actually pretty few. It's been since almost a year, and so the results really do need to be updated. So I'm actually going to give a few examples rather than a full report. But you can see here there are a number of plants, and some of them are actually North American plants, such as the oak, green tea, which is not North American, but certainly has been completely integrated into North American culture. Jasmine, Salvia apiana, which is white sage, which is a very powerful North American plant that has been used by indigenous people of the North, and really a very, very powerful master plant. Vitex, which is chasteberry and western redbud. So these are plants of North America that have now been dieted. And I have talked to people from France who have dieted plants from France. So there is this trend as this technology moves out of the jungle and into places around the world to, let's diet our local plants. And it's also, I think, a really powerful approach. When we think about carbon footprint, when we think about where we're going, what we're doing, it's great to have this technology, but do we need to be getting on a plane and going to Peru or transporting plants here all the time when we have a really rich pharmacopoeia right in our own backyard? So let's start using it, figuring it out, and taking the time to do that. I think that we live in such a fast-paced, world that it takes a lot of time to do this. And so I don't think we need to just rely on the master plants of South America. We have master plants all around us. It's going to take a while for us to work our way to figure out which ones those are. I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, like obvious candidates, I should say, like white sage. Like people say, well, yeah, I bet you that's a master plant. So that's a great candidate for dieting. So some specific diets, and and I'm going to call them anecdotal reports, because certainly this isn't a scientific study that's been done, but it results from this folk knowledge that's been amassed from people dieting here in the north. So the Ayahuasca Vine, the Banisteriopsis capi, has been used for people suffering from quote-unquote depression and people who have been on antidepressants for either short periods of time or extended periods of time. So, as mentioned, the vine contains an MAOI, which is reversible, and MAOIs were the first antidepressants, such as parnate. So, it's really interesting. We have a plant containing a substance that was the very first antidepressants. Parnate is not an SSRI, but has a different mechanism of action. But people who have been depressed or prescribed antidepressants, SSRIs, have successfully dieted with the vine only, containing the harmala alkaloids, which is completely legal, and felt relief from their depression. And so it's interesting, I have this working theory, instinct, idea that what's happening is that this technology and this way of working is working similarly to the way herbs work in Chinese medicine. Is there anybody here who's a doctor of Chinese medicine or no? Okay. So I'll do my best to explain it the way my doctor of Chinese medicine has explained it to me. So the reason why we don't have to take herbs for the rest of our life if we're prescribed herbs by a doctor of Chinese medicine is because what it does is it jump-starts the system. So it realigns things, gets it aligned, jump-starts it, and kind of gets it on the right path. So I believe this is what's happening specifically and particularly with the ayahuasca vine in people who are suffering from depression. So there's this chemical imbalance, and if we take that allopathic view that there's a chemical imbalance, our way of describing it, and we work with the ayahuasca vine, which then has the effect of, inhibiting the monoamine oxidase, increasing serotonin levels naturally because we're producing it rather than inhibiting the reuptake, which, in my opinion, and what we've seen, is really causing the reuptake inhibitors to atrophy and not function on their own. But what's happening is these plants are saying, okay, here's a pathway. And at the cellular level, and at the spiritual level, and at the level of our cosmic consciousness, there is a resonance that this is feeling in alignment. This is feeling like this is how it should be, so to speak. And so we come into a harmonic resonance with that, and it's kind of like if someone's beating a drum, and you got the beat, and then you start getting with the beat, right? Like then you start picking it up on your own. The person who's beating the drum over there doesn't need to beat it anymore, but there becomes this harmonic resonance with the plants, and because intuitively we know what feels whole and complete and unified, even if it's not here in our head, but, on that core level, we start to resonate with that. And then even when we take the plant away and we take the diet away, we can continue on in that healing. And there's been good evidence to suggest this working just with the vine in my experience. So I'll just talk about two people in particular. One person who was able to discontinue antidepressants after 1 year of use, and 2 years later, now it's coming up on 3 years later, is still pharmaceutical free, and that diet was a diet of 1 month. So 1 month with the vine. Other person is a woman who had been on antidepressants, I think it was 20 plus years, a woman in her 60s. And in fact, the reason why she discontinued the antidepressants, because here's the kicker, you can't be taking the antidepressants and then take the Banisteriopsis caapi, the vine. So so for her, in her case, she wanted to drink ayahuasca. She didn't really care that she was on antidepressants. It never even crossed her mind that I should stop taking antidepressants. She was happy taking antidepressants. She's like, they make me happy, I like it. But I want to drink ayahuasca. So she knew she had to stop the antidepressants. But then when she stopped the antidepressants and drank ayahuasca, she was like, wow, like maybe I actually don't have to be putting the pharmaceuticals into my body. So like this is like very, very long-term use of SSRIs and other anti-anxiety medications. And again, now, and in that case, it was a diet of 3 weeks. So, there was a preparatory diet and then a diet of 3 weeks with the ayahuasca vine, and she's now coming up on 3.5 years being free of antidepressants. It's just like, oh my gosh, I never knew life could be so good without popping those pills all the time. So, to me, I think the work with the Ayahuasca Vine is so promising, and it's so promising because it can be used much the same way other herbal remedies are used. It's plant-based, it's all natural, and it's legal. Until, of course, a pharmaceutical company gets a hold of it and says, okay, now we're going to use it. Sequoia, here's another plant that has proven to be amazing for asthma, okay? And it's the needles, which are the leaves of the sequoia, the coast redwood, and 3 people using inhalers regularly, like every day, able to discontinue their inhaler use after dieting with sequoia. So in the case of sequoia, because this isn't a formal scientific laboratory study, we say, okay, is it the sequoia or is it the fact that we're eliminating all of these other things from the diet, right? Because that's also acting as a bit of an elimination diet that may be giving rise to the allergic reactions. We don't know. And do we have to? I don't know that we have to, right? Because if that person diets with sequoia, oftentimes what happens is people diet, and then after they diet, they realize, oh, I'm recognizing things about my diet that feel much better as a result of this diet. And it doesn't mean like you keep the diet forever and you never eat salt or something sweet again, but it also provides information about our diet because we're taking all those things away. And we're seeing, and then when we start to add them back in, we're like, oh, that bread doesn't feel so good, or oh, when I eat the sugar, it doesn't feel so good. So it really operates on multiple levels and brings multiple awarenesses about, our own state of health and well-being. And like I said, is it the plants? It could be the plants. Is it the diet? I think it's a combination of all of those things, including the fact that we're taking some time every single day to cultivate a relationship with a plant, which really is taking some time every single day to cultivate a relationship with ourselves and taking time for us, which many of us don't do. Many of us do, but many of us don't. Let's see what's on the next slide. So some of the other plants, a number of people here raised their hand that they've dieted with plants. So, perhaps you can answer questions for the others here who haven't, who may have questions. But some of the other plants, I guess there are a couple of plants that I'll talk about, or maybe one that I'll talk about. I mentioned earlier a plant called Pinyon Blanco, okay? So that's a plant that's pretty big in our community and a plant that's pretty big for me. And unlike some of the other plants, it doesn't necessarily heal a specific physical discomfort, disease, difficulty. It's a plant of clarity. It's a plant of illumination. It's a plant that doesn't have darkness in the Shipibo lineage. So what it can do is it can bring clarity and insight and light to whatever the situation is, so we can see what needs to be healed. And it may actually lead to dieting another plant because it will bring illumination to where the imbalance is or where the misalignment is. So again, it's not something that can be pigeonholed like, okay, when you say how much do you take, like, it depends on the plant, right? Pinyon Blanco, if you're taking a preparation of the leaves, you might take, a regularly prepared tea with that, like, some leaves and water brewed for 20 minutes, you might take 30 milliliters. If you're dieting with the resin, which is the sap that, is drawn out, first thing in the morning after dawn, you would take much less because it's much stronger. So in this way, it's very hard to quantify. And then it's also dependent on the practitioner, right? There's plants like Bovenzana. Are you dieting the leaf or are you dieting the root? And if you're dieting the leaf, it's one effect. If you're dieting the root, it may be another. And how much depends on who you're dieting with. So all of these things are very Can't really quantify them, and actually I'm kind of glad, because I think it keeps them protected from
Big farm.
big farm and the establishment. Yeah. So thank you. So the other thing about this practice is the process of dieta itself is our teacher. So if we imagine, okay, no salt, no sugar, no sex, no dairy, and we're coming into a diet, and, I've said this many times, and those of you who know me or have heard this talk have heard this before. So we reach to put some salt on something, and we're like, oh, I'm dieting, I can't have the salt. So what comes up? Are we like, but I really want the salt? Are we like, oh, I'm really glad I remembered. I really want the salt. Okay, but what do I really want? So it becomes a process of inquiry, right? And so the diet itself, not just the plant, but the dieting of the plant is also our teacher. And right now we have more questions than answers, and that's really a good thing. I like to say it's not like baking a loaf of bread. We got it, we're done, okay. I'm always looking for what's the next question, and in that way we remain curious. And certainly here in North America, the next questions are, what's the next plant? How can we apply this rich technology that has been passed down through the generations, here in urban North America? We don't have to go to the jungle. We have it all right here in our own backyard. And there is continuing research being done with some of these plants, and certainly with ayahuasca and Banisteriopsis capi in laboratory settings. And it's also important to practice in a way that's safe. So even though we're talking about, herbals and plants, it doesn't mean that inherently they're safe. They contain really powerful alkaloids, psychoactive or not. So it's also really important to make sure that if we're dieting, that we're doing so having done the research that we need to do to make sure that whatever we're ingesting is safe, or working with a practitioner who we've vetted and we've questioned about their background and their knowledge, so that we know that we're working in a way that's safe. And not just with the plants, but with their energies as well. And I see this as emerging of the North American herbalist tradition, which is folk knowledge. We have the wonderful North American herbalists, coming out of Appalachia and the Deep South, and the herbalist tradition in indigenous Native North American practices, with the South American technologies. And so, this is kind of the upside of this global emerging culture, that we get to share these things and bring them forth in a way that works for us in the here and now. So I came across this today, and I'm going to read it out loud. The root structures of plants and trees are often used to reinforce soil. But when those plants and trees die or they're damaged, we get holes in the soil where the roots should be. The result is a weakened soil system prone to erosion. And if we go back to the beginning quote about the roots being the brain of the plant, I think that there's something really important at play here, and I'm not completely clear on how to articulate it, but this notion that we have this massive neural network, this vegetable neural network that is the underpinning of what is sustaining life on Earth. Right? It's giving us the very air that we breathe. So I think that's pretty good evidence that the plants are asking for this relationship with us. And I also think that it's really important to think about, when we are damaging the plants, right? Or there's holes in the soil where the roots should be. There's this weakened soil system prone to erosion. So in a way, we're eroding, the intelligence and the capacity to perhaps genetically transmit from one generation to the next this really important knowledge So I guess it's a little bit of a plug for awareness of what a precious resource we have, like right here. And it's not just the master plants or the medicinal plants or the ornamental plants or any plant or tree that we think of in that way, but every single plant, what we call a weed popping up through the pavement, right, is kind of like holding the entire planet together and holding us together. So I know that for me, I learned so much from that. And so both the beginning quote about the roots being, the brain of the plant, and this end quote about, the root structures using to reinforce the soil and hold everything together are just really food for thought, pun intended. I don't know if is there another slide after this one?
Yeah.
One more? Okay, yeah, so basically this is what PlantTeachers is about, and I thank you all for listening, and I welcome any questions you might have.
Can you repeat the question too?
Question about a plant called Pinyon Colorado. If you've dieted that plant, what your experience might have been. I spent some time about 5 years ago dieting that plant in Culpa, and the maestra who opened my diet didn't tell me what necessarily the purpose of the plant was, other than, this is the plant you need to diet for a week. And I had my own kind of opening and understanding about what that plant was, but I'm curious as to what your kind of experience may have been with it, because it's really hard to find information about that plant on the internet.
Okay, so the question is, he died at Pinyon Colorado in Pucallpa about 5 years ago for 1 week. The maestra who opened his diet didn't really give him information other than that was the plant he needed to diet, and was curious what the experience has been with Pinyon Colorado. So, Pinyon Colorado, depending on how long it's dieted, it can have a really powerful antiseptic quality to it in the physical, but the companion is a clearing of the mind. The antiseptic quality in the body is also, the cleaning and of the mind as well. In particular, I actually died at Pinyon Colorado in an interesting situation. It was a funny diet that I did where. It was a very short diet in the Shipibo tradition, and you may have worked with a Shipibo person. Typically, you diet long periods of time, like a month, 3 months, 6 months. Like diets aren't usually a week, unless you're there for a seminar or you're just there for that period of time. But I dieted it 2 weeks on my own in that I was in a tambo in complete isolation, and not only did I stay in the isolation, I actually cooked my own food there in the jungle and did it complete isolation. Like somebody came and checked on me. I kind of peeked over, everything okay over there. And my experience of it was mind clearing. It was like a clarity of mind. And it was also a plant that helped me cultivate patience. Patience. So, so from a traditional perspective, and there is a way to get information on that, and a great resource is James Duke. He has he's done amazing research on a variety of plants, South American plants. So, and I believe you can probably, if you look up James Duke and Pinyon Colorado, you'd probably find something. And if you want more information, Rain Tree, I forget how their website is styled, but they're defunct, but they have a very, very large database that they still make available to the public on the internet. So, yeah. What was your experience with it?
A lot of cleaning.
Yeah.
My diet was restricted to 1 meal a day,
Mm-hmm.
and then alternating Pinyon Colorado 1 evening before bed, and then the other alternate evening would be Ayahuasca ceremony.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a very, very like unbelievably lucid way.
Yeah.
To the point of like where I was staying in Yurinacocha, the water was very high. It was about this time of year.
Yeah.
So I had like I thought I was awake, and I went downstairs to the veranda, and I felt like the coldness, of kind of midnight air, and then all of a sudden I realized that I was dreaming. And I said, "Oh, well, I'll fly." And so I just like zoomed up into the sky and feel the air getting colder and colder, and it was like unbelievably real, only to be, find myself in a very different type of dimension with different types of entities. Then to wake up and look at my clock and, I had to catch my plane.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, but it was very much a clarity and a big opening for me, for sure.
Yeah. Well, when we're dieting in the jungle, even here, it depends on the plant, but oftentimes we'll we'll take the plant in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, and then we go to sleep, specifically so that we can dream with the plant. Because, all of these plants have the capacity, some more than others, to amplify our capacity for learning and travel in the dream time really powerfully. Yeah. Yeah. So what I heard you say is that you were dieting tobacco, you were 5 days into the dieta, and you stopped keeping the diet restrictions. But did you also stop taking the tobacco? Did someone close the diet? Yeah. So, here's potential consequences, and these are all potentials. What's really more important is what happened to you. So, I don't think of it as, oh, I failed. We talk about breaking the diet, and that can happen even after we close the diet. Like we shock our system by engaging in non-diet kinds of activity too soon. But what can happen is we have this open relationship with a really powerful plant and these open energies. So when we're in diet, we're open, right? So here's this open connection. And if it's not closed, or let's just say we stop the diet and we don't clean that, we're open and vulnerable to outside energies coming in. And so that can have an adverse effect in all realms, whether it's spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, or physically. The other thing is, this idea that we failed somehow. Oftentimes what happens is we then carry this story that we failed. And then when we're in that compromised place of thinking of ourselves that way, it's not surprising that maybe things in our life aren't going so well because we're thinking, oh man, I messed that up, right? And we get into that cycle of failure. If that makes sense. When you say, what I heard you say is for a couple of months, did you use the word difficulties? Well, and that's a really good point. Like, being in a diet that you're not really ready for is also not good. But like why am I doing this? So I think it's also when I said about, vetting the practitioner, being really careful about the plants, feeling really empowered and at choice when we decide to diet or do anything, particularly anytime we're taking something into our body, whether it's psychoactive or not, and certainly, tobacco is really strong. It's a very, very strong plant. And in fact, if you talk to the shamans, many of who I know, you said, like, if you had to pick between ayahuasca and tobacco, which would it be? It would be tobacco. So strong.
To build off of her question, do people sometimes have adverse relationships with different kinds of plants? I mean, personally, I've done ayahuasca a handful of times. The last time I did it, I did a dieta. Let's just say I abstained from eating all of the things on your list, and it didn't really work for me. I got a stomach ache, and I, had a little momentary burst of things, but it didn't work. And I've had that experience before as well. So I'm just wondering, there's certain alcohols that aren't good for people. Is like the ayahuasca my whiskey? Is that the thing I should just stay away from, or?
Well, I mean, I think that there are so many factors. Doing the diet isn't guaranteed not to have a stomach ache or not to purge or not to feel like shit while you're in the experience. To put it right. Like, I'm just saying that, we all resonate with different things. And maybe you don't resonate with ayahuasca, and that's fine. But saying that I did a diet, like, oh, I did this diet, and then I didn't really recognize, I didn't feel like I was having an effect. It's not like a 1 + 1 = 2. The other thing about ayahuasca is sometimes maybe we feel like we're not having an effect because we're not seeing the electric pink buffalo come over the hill. When in fact, the ayahuasca, the vine, it's a really powerful antioxidant. Some ethnopharmacologists believe it has about 1,000 times the antioxidants as green tea. It's a really powerful detoxifier. So maybe it's working on that level, right? And those people who are seeing the electric pink buffalo, that's a distraction because ayahuasca is healing at a different level. That would be overwhelming if you were completely aware of it. So, and the best answer to that is to talk to the practitioner that you're working with because, really, there's the preparation, there's the experience with ayahuasca, for example, that I believe is a catalyst in many respects. It's the integration afterwards. So if that's how you're feeling or thinking, talk it to the practitioner who's stewarded that experience for you. Like, that's where to go is, to the practitioner. So.
I have a question about the cancer. On the cancer subject, I have a close friend, and she has experience with her mother. She has a cancer, and she was dieted with the mother and the father in the same time for 2 weeks with Shipibo in Peru, and the mother, she didn't drink ayahuasca.
Right.
Both of them, they drink ayahuasca. She had only 3 kinds of plants, the mother, and they come back to country where I come from, and I'm just thinking, what do you have? What can you say about that kind of experience? The people who are very sick, or they,
So your friend's parents went to Peru.
Yeah.
Her mother has cancer.
Yeah.
And she dieted with some plant. She didn't drink ayahuasca.
Yeah.
She dieted with another plant. What is the country that you're from?
Poland.
Okay, and then went back to Poland. And then what was the result?
The result is that it happened 2 months ago. So they're still in the process, and she's fine, like in a good mood. They didn't check, they didn't make any tests, so I don't know exactly right now what's happening. But the thing is, like, basically, what kind of experience do you have about the people who has a cancer and they
Right.
going to the Peru, they want to,
Yeah, it really depends. So there's a couple of approaches, like ayahuasca is a plant that's used for cancers, right? And sometimes it can ameliorate symptoms. Sometimes there have been reports of it reducing the size of tumors. Depends on the kind of cancer. And then there's also the plants and the process of dieting and also drinking ayahuasca that can help to alleviate this end-of-life anxiety, for which, psilocybin studies are taking place now. So it really depends, although I do know one person who, had stage 4 cancer, went to Peru, worked with ayahuasca, and pretty much didn't progress for quite a while. Somebody else, stage 4 cancer, went to Peru, dieted for a month, and still died 6 weeks later. So.
One more question.
Okay, one more question. So,
Can you talk a little bit, Sita, about the commercialization and the access that people have in North America, here specifically, maybe in Los Angeles, and how people can protect themselves from making sure that they're working with practitioners that have a good knowledge base and that they're in a safe environment. I know there are people out there that are making medicine and bringing medicine that isn't really medicine. It's almost like they're giving them a trip to Disneyland.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important for people to be educated about how to find a safe journey and how to make questions to ask practitioners.
Yeah, so that's a big question, and I think self-responsibility and knowing the right questions to ask. So,
So what are those questions?
what are those questions? What is it that you're administering? I've talked to people who don't even know, what was in the ayahuasca brew? I don't know. Where did it come from? Who made it? What's your lineage? How did you learn? How many participants to practitioners are present? How many helpers? What is the preparation? What is the support before, during, and after? That's just a few of them. Here's the thing. A really good barometer is how many questions is that practitioner asking you? So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Good question. And I know Ashley is about to introduce Rachel in just a moment. Woohoo! And so also, Rachel may, if we can get her going a little bit, maybe she'll say a few things about dieting too before she starts her poetry share. So, thank you, everybody.
Yay. Thank you so much, Sita. That was awesome. I hope you all found that really interesting and informative, and please feel free to ask questions of Sita afterwards. And I would like to finish off with Rachel, who's going to give us a poem. So come on up.
What? Oh.
Your poems.
Yeah. But I was wondering, okay. Hi. I'm so excited you talked about roots. Because, I'm doing the root poem, so. Yeah, synergy is a beautiful thing. Thank you all for staying and listening to poetry. And Ash, congratulations. Happy anniversary. Happy birthday. It's so beautiful what you've created. And I'm so happy that you let me come share poetry tonight. Yeah. Where are my blessed root vegetables? Do you know what it means to go deep? I am recruiting amorous warriors. Are you a gangster of love? Who is with me? Who among you will risk everything for the feeling? Are you more afraid of numbness than potential consequence? Do you crush harder than a Valentine's jackboot? Will you willingly be a fool for amour? Then I need you for my starry-eyed revolution, my sexy insurrection. I'm talking about a desirous uprising. Who will join my love army of cosmic carrots? Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me started on passion. This life rides me rough. I grab the reins and white knuckle it. What can I say? Some of us are just born with this misfit status of awkwardness that makes a flesh suit feel like a prison you just want to get sprung from. Yeah, I get bruised. Yeah, I get confused. I don't fit in this life right. Don't get me started on heartache, on love unrequited, on the deliciousness of limerence, on obsession. That's my bread and butter. If you don't get it, then you don't get it. Congratulations, that's better for you. But if you do, then you know what I mean when I say that I need you to feel me, or I will explode in a puff of pink smoke and rainbow glitter, because I am a mystic, and that's how we do. Let's talk about ice. I stumble clumsily. I adore crushingly. I am blinded with desire. And if loving wildly is such a crime, then lock me up and throw away the key. No, seriously, handcuff me to the bedpost immediately. I feel deeply. I am intimate with the abyss. I have been to the valley bottom. Let's talk about the deep freeze. Let's talk about the option of numbness. Because you don't get to pick and choose what feelings you shut down. It's an all or nothing proposition. You can't just pretend everything's fine while you're dying inside and then expect your inner wisdom not to stop whispering. Why should she if you're not even listening? Are you willing to feel the pain of the ice just to remember that you're alive? Will you step into the crystalline mystery? Let's talk about passion. When we talk about it, we have to go down to the root. Plants sending their tendrils deep into the dirt. Praise be to the cosmic carrot, fearlessly flourishing in the dead of winter, buried under a blanket of snow, fighting for survival despite all the difficulties. This is the life that it knows. So what must it do to continue to exist? This humble carrot in the frozen earth converts its starches into sugars to avoid forming ice crystals, because if it freezes, it dies. Its curtains. That's it. Its destiny is to be eaten in holy communion with the creature whose mouth receives it. This carrot is delicious, exceedingly exquisite. And what is the translation of all of this sweetness? Those sugars were formed by the carrot's decision to live, the honeyed byproduct of its willingness to exist in spite of the ice and the frost and the struggle. The message encoded in that flavor is, I don't want to die. The meaning of this sweetness is, I am fighting for my life. So, when you feel like you feel too much, when you want to give up, when it seems like everything would be better if you could just deaden your spiritual nerve endings, when your soul's pilot light is on the blink, consider the cosmic carrot, braving the inhospitable winter and only growing sweeter. You were built for miracles. You are the raw material of miracles. I am willing to feel, to fight for your enlightenment. Your happiness is my selfish desire, because with your upliftment, we all can rise higher, baby. I want to see you smile. Yeah. My cosmic carrot love army stands for goodness, for compassion, for goofy optimism, for laughter, for dancing, for inclusion. We face an army and a wall of resistance. Guess what? That's all right. We ain't just here to preach to the choir. These haters need to hear it too. So, are you a foot soldier who blindly follows orders? Or are Are you an amorous warrior? Are you ready to rise up in righteous resistance and revolution? Are you willing to dive into your own darkness? I'm not looking for perfection in my gangsters of love. You don't have to have it all figured out or be famous to start being amazing. You don't need anyone's permission to exist. Just look at you, dizzy with heart bliss. Listen to the white spaces around the black ink of my words. This love has thrust. This love has momentum. This love is rising up. This love, I said, this love has got velocity. Will you walk with me? This love, it is rumbling. This love is erupting. Can you feel it? The ice threatens to crystallize my veins on the daily. I am tempted with numbness to face the deep freeze constantly. Why do I dance till I'm covered in sweat? Why do I cry when I listen to Solomon Burke? Why is life worth it? Why does any of this matter? Why do I offer up my heart throbbing on a silver platter? Why do I discuss the importance of gusto with 11-year-olds? Why do I get up on a stage behind a microphone? Passion. My gangsters of love. I'm inviting you to come awake. I'm not saying to be unafraid. I'm saying be brave anyway. In this split second, your heart is open. Now that you're feeling it, you can generate momentum. Let your passion grow. Thaw your soul. Resist the impulse to belittle your own vulnerability. Kick out your inner cynic. We break our own hearts, and our hearts get broken. Life breaks us, but we keep on going. My gangsters of love, alchemize the bitter into sweet. Grab your cosmic carrot and plant it in the fertile field of infinite possibility. This is the uprising of desire. It is beginning. Can you feel it? Will you willingly walk through the fire feeling? I am recruiting amorous warriors. Oh, my passionate roots. Who among you will join me